terrain was ferocious. Casualties were ferocious.
One shell came over and was so close that I flopped down. Before I could pick myself up, another one came down and lit right in the trench.
Home again are these Canadian heroes of the Deer Parade.
It was a terrible war. Of course, war is hell anyway.
Honor the memory of those who gave their lives in battle that we might live in peace.
You have done an extraordinary job.
We've been ready, we are ready, we will be ready.
You are looking at the National War Memorial in Ottawa live, a somber and overcast day here in the nation's capital. We're here today honoring Canada's war veterans on the 11th day of the 11th month as we approach the 11th hour. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our very special coverage of Remembrance Day. We are pausing today to reflect on the men and women who fought for this country. This is the 75th anniversary of the start of the Korean conflict. More than 26,000 Canadians served. The Canadian contingent made up the third largest among the UN countries. 516 Canadians died during the 3-year mission against North Korea and China. In the First World War, more than 66,000 Canadian soldiers were killed in the line of duty. More than 172,000 others were wounded. In the Second World War, more than 45,000 Canadians gave the ultimate sacrifice for this country. Another 55,000 men and women were injured in that conflict. And in more recent deployments, 1 Canadian was killed in Somalia, 23 died in the Balkans, and 158 Canadians were killed in Afghanistan. CTV's Andy Bergeron-Oliver is right behind me on Elgin Street in Ottawa, where crowds are starting to build, and always a very powerful ceremony here in Ottawa every single year. Describe the mood for us right now, Annie. What's it like where you are?
Well, Omar, it is really cold and windy and snowy, but people are still coming out here. We talked to one person who flew all the way from Corner Brook, Newfoundland, another who drove 6.5 hours this morning to be here. They're bundled up and they want to be here to remember, whether that's somebody that they love who fought and served, whether it is a neighbor or a friend. Most people are here because they remember somebody. Today is that opportunity to tell their story and to reflect on their service, what it meant to Canada. If you look around, you see people holding pictures of loved ones. You'll see people wearing medals of their family members who died in the wars. And you also get the chance to talk to people who have their own stories to tell. Later in this show, we'll introduce you to a 103-year-old veteran who was here for the very first time. He fought in the Second World War, never had the chance to make it. This year at 103, he made the trip from Calgary, wanted to be here in person. He told me he wanted to remember 3 of his comrades in the Air Force who didn't make it back for them, and that is who was on his mind today, Omar. That's what this somber event is about, remembering people who fought and served for Canada, remembering their sacrifice, and having a chance to tell their story to anybody here today who will listen.
So many have that personal connection. Annie, thank you so much. And we should quickly mention, as Annie mentioned, it's an overcast day, some flurries in the sky right now. And as a result, the traditional fly past that we see every year has been canceled due to the weather. So that will not be happening this year. Standing by, let's get to the Chief of the Defense Staff, Jenny Carignan, who is with me now. General, it's terrific to have you on. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Omar. It's an honor to be here today.
General, I want to ask you first about the funding commitments that we saw in last week's budget. This Remembrance Day happening just a week after that budget was unveiled, $85 billion over 5 years. What has that done in terms of the morale for the CAF, and how confident are you that those billions of dollars will actually be dispersed?
Of course, Omar, it's very good news for us that will allow us to work on our readiness and also in our transformation and modernization efforts. So good news across the board.
I want to ask you as well as about a story in the Ottawa Citizen that is basically saying that you are looking at relying on public service essentially to boost the ranks of the CAF by about 300,000. Tell me a little bit more about that and what exactly you're looking at having them do.
So the lines are not quite correct in that sense. This is part of our transformation and modernization efforts, which includes increasing our primary reserve and supplementary reserve to be prepared in times of crisis, whether it's here or anywhere else. But when we're thinking about the number of events and domestic operations we've had in terms of fighting forest fires and so on. So this is all part of our transformation effort, and all Canadians will be, of course, voluntarily invited to serve. But I think it is part of the work that we are doing, and then, frankly, in a little bit of a continuation of past, present, and then future service, which is what we are recognizing here today.
And so, General, what would be the role of these public servants? I know you mentioned that it would be a voluntary exercise. What exactly would they be doing?
It is not focused directly to public servants. Our public servants are already contributing extensively to the work that we are doing in defense. All Canadians, of course, would be invited based on various skills to be part of this endeavor. But this is simply part of the current planning. We are studying this and then see how we could make this happen.
There has been a lot of discussion lately about recruiting and retention efforts. We know recently there was a report that was done by the Auditor General who highlighted some of the challenges in terms of recruiting and retaining members in the Canadian Armed Forces. What is your sense of that? Are things getting better, or where do you think the focus should be in order to draw more people?
So, of course, the recommendations of the Auditor General are absolutely welcome. We are onboarding those recommendations to make sure that we are consistently improving our processes and the way we are attracting and then creating awareness for the service and then service in the Canadian Armed Forces. So, of course, we have seen a lot of interest. We have a lot of Canadians showing up at our door, interested in service. Last year, we have we did more than achieve our target, which was good news. And then this year, we are also on track to do extremely well in terms of recruiting, having expanded our target as well. So efforts are ongoing and consistently improving our system, and again delivering a lot of results. On the retention piece, our results are also showing up a lot of progress. Last year overall we finished 2,000 above. So again, this is moving towards what we are looking for.
General Carignan, before we let you go, I'm looking at the faces of the veterans behind me, and you can see the pride etched in their faces still. And it's a cold day here in Ottawa. It's a very chilly day, and they still, are here. They're showing up. We know that more than 1 million Canadians served in the Second World War, and now I believe there are fewer than 4,000 of these veterans who are with us today. What do you want Canadians to know on this day?
I think this needs to remain a very special day. We have a duty to remember. we are still today living in very unstable and dangerous times. It is extremely important to understand the consequences that conflict have on humans, which is why it's important to be ready and prepared adequately to do this. And then so much about also remembering the sacrifices of the past, inspire ourselves from those generous acts of selflessness. Also understand that today's service is still well and alive, and again, looking at the way ahead to the future. So an extremely important day to remember that spans basically from past to future.
Such an important message to reflect on. General Carignan, thanks again for your time this morning. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Omar.
I want to bring in our expert panel now who will be guiding us through this morning. We are joined by award-winning author and historian Charlotte Gray, the former Surgeon General of Canada, Dr. Hans Jung, and the Deputy Commanding Officer of the 32nd Canadian Brigade Group Battle School, Major Jean-Michel Guidlot. Major Guidlot, I want to start with you. Annie was mentioning off the top of the show that everybody who comes here seems to have a personal connection, and year after year we see people who bring with them mementos that have been passed on, through generations in their family. And tell me a little bit about your own personal connection and your family, because you've got several members in your family who've served.
Yes, and for the Guidlots, the Remembrance Day is touches home. My grandfather served in the Second World War. He contributed to the liberation of Europe 80 years ago. My father served and continues to serve his community. His brothers each served, and my brother and I also serve today. And so Remembrance Day marks a very, very important for the Guidlot family.
What did they tell you, your father and your grandfather, about the meaning of sacrifice and service? Was it anything in particular that they told you that inspired your own service, or did you decide to just, because it's hard to talk about sometimes what you've seen? Very much, very much. And so for my father, in my upbringing, it was always service to the community. Doing your part. He did not know that I was going to one day serve, and so it was first service to your community, and then eventually it was a calling. And my brother and I, he joined in fact first, and then I followed in his footsteps. And so it was really a call to service, and sitting around the dining room table and listening to Granddad and tell his story, that was really important to us. And so I think that's what led me here. What an incredible journey. Dr. Jung, I know you have a personal connection as well. As we mentioned, it's the 75th anniversary of the Korean conflict. Tell me about that.
Well, the Korean War ended in '53, rather the armistice was in '53, and I was personally born in '58. So I'm a direct beneficiary of the Korean War veterans of Canada and the United Nations countries that participated. That was the primary reason why I joined the military in 1981 after I got into medical school at the University of Toronto. And what was initially intended to be a short stint turned out to be a 31-year career. So and I had a very amazing, very grateful time in the military, and it's been a wonderful experience to give back to what I benefited from Canadian sacrifice.
And often people are not aware exactly of Canada's contribution, right? It's called the Forgotten War.
Exactly.
As we mentioned off the top, Canada had the third largest contingent of all the UN countries, right. So the contribution was absolutely significant. Right. Charlotte Gray, it's great to have you back with us this year as well. Tell me a little bit about the differences you've observed at this time of heightened tensions between Canada and the U.S. I mean, there is unity in, honoring the sacrifice and respecting those who fought for freedom. But, you and I were chatting about the fact that the way it's done in the two countries is quite different.
It's really significant. I mean, this is Remembrance Day for us. It's a very solemn occasion. And what we remember is those who laid down their lives. In fact, not just to in a war where they had felt a sort of moral obligation to fight, but also for a country. In fact, every military endeavor that the Canadian Armed Forces have been involved in has strengthened Canada as a nation, has strengthened the sense that this is a sovereign country. And so today we honor them, and we honor them with solemnity, with poppies, with all kinds of ways of it's a sober, dignified occasion. I asked American friends, so for you it's Veterans Day. How is it celebrated? What's going on there? And What's interesting is that Veterans Day for them is about celebrating living veterans, celebrating those who fought and who are still amongst us. And it's nothing like as solemn, although they do have a ceremony at Arlington Military Cemetery. One said it's about shopping, and they have a Memorial Day in May where they do remember the dead. But for Canada, it's about men and women who laid down their lives to preserve and enhance Canadian sovereignty. And that is very poignant and very telling right now at this year when, we have a president who talks about Canada as becoming a 51st state. I mean, as our Prime Minister says, it's not going to happen. But just the differences in military culture, the differences between these two democracies. And, I mean, we saw the very impressive General Carignan speaking, and to have a woman chief of the defense staff at a point where our neighbors to the south, in fact, the forces there are becoming sort of hyper-masculinized and just a completely different approach to what is the role of the military.
And Remembrance Day, obviously especially significant this year as we have been reminded of the terrible cost of conflict around the world. Let's get back to CTV's Annie Bergeron-Oliver, who is just very close to me here in Ottawa. And Annie, I believe you have a couple with you who've traveled quite the distance to attend their first National Remembrance Day ceremony here in the nation's capital.
That's right, Omar. A lot of people just walk 10, 15 minutes, but this couple, Debbie and Brian, they actually came all the way from Calgary. You got it as a birthday present. Tell me a little bit about why you wanted to be here.
Well, I'm a very proud Canadian. I love living in Canada, and, I feel we owe a debt of gratitude to those servicemen and women who, from the past, the present, and the future, and it's something we've always wanted to do.
So now you're wearing 3 poppies today, in part to remember your father who fought in the Second World War. You said you had a brother, but also because you wanted to be able to put those on the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. Tell me what that means to you, that moment.
Well, we've seen it on television lots of times, and it's been a lifelong dream to do that. And so we're here. We're just proud Canadians and very proud of what they've done. So.
And you're here in part to remember your father. Tell me a bit about him and why that's important.
He enlisted in World War II and also was in Korea. And I have a brother who was in the Navy.
And how important is it to share his story today and tell people about your father?
I wish he was here still. He was 97 when he passed away, and would mean a lot. It does mean a lot to us.
Thank you so much for chatting with us, and I hope that this is everything that you hoped it would be.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Back to you, Omar.
All right, Annie, thank you. And let's go back to the Cenotaph, where we're joined by the Minister of Veteran Affairs, Jill McDyke. Minister, great to have you on this morning.
Thank you for having me. It's a special day to be here in Ottawa.
It certainly is, and a powerful day as well. We always protect the solemnity of this day, but I know a lot of veterans are wondering, this year, this Remembrance Day is coming a week after the federal budget, and I know your government has cut funding to veterans by more than $4 billion. And so in terms of the real-world impact for those veterans, what does it mean?
Well, first, I'd like to clarify that it's not actually a cut. What we are doing is making an adjustment to the reimbursement for one type of treatment to bring it in line with market rates. And in fact, we're actually investing in our veterans with over $184 million to equip us to be able to deliver services and benefits to the veterans that they're eligible for in a more timely and responsive manner to them. So we're actually investing in veterans and making sure they have access to what they need.
So to clarify then, service standards will not change and benefits will not change?
Correct. Veterans are not losing access to benefits. What we are doing is making an adjustment to a reimbursement for one of the benefits that is available to them to bring it in line with the market rates of that particular product. Making sure that veterans have access to the benefits to which they're eligible is our key focus, and we're investing in doing it in a more timely manner.
Minister, I know one of the other pockets of money in the budget will be going towards recruitment, which is a major challenge, as we've been mentioning. The Auditor General mentioned that in her report recently. Tell me exactly how that's going to change. What's going to be done to recruit more members into the CAF and get them into basic training? Because that was one of her observations as well, that even once they're recruited, they're not even making it on track for that.
Well, I think today is an example of how we can be having more conversations about veterans, but specifically about today's modern day veterans and how it is that veterans are serving and Canadian Armed Forces members are serving. You know, growing up, when I think of a veteran, I would think of somebody from the Second World War, the First World War, Korea. And today we know that veterans are serving in many different places, whether it's the Persian Gulf, Afghanistan, but it's also the humanitarian work that's being done, is the disaster response. And so I think as we're telling these stories and making them connected to community and youth, there's an opportunity to highlight the incredible skills that individuals can get through service in the CAF, and those are part of the storytelling that we can be doing. We also know that we've made the significant investment to raise the compensation rates and the pay raises for our CAF members, as we had taken feedback that, you know, this was a factor, and so we're making those investments to show that service in the CAF is a future you can count on, and as Veterans Affairs will continue to be there with these individuals after their service.
Minister, as you watch the faces and the crowd gathering around you, what are you thinking today? Well, for myself, I'm thinking about my grandfathers that served and what their experiences are like. But again, I'm also thinking about my uncle who served after the Second World War, and I'm thinking about the service of my good family friend who's serving currently in Edmonton. And I'm thinking about what the future will look like for them. I'm thinking about the foundation of our country that has been built because of the service of those that have served previously and those serving today, and the country that we're building for my niece and nephew as they grow up. So all of these are coming in, and then I'm also reflecting on the conversations that I've had with veterans across the country in the last 6 months, as I think about the veteran entrepreneurs I've met, if I think about the families that I was with yesterday that were welcoming individuals home, and as I think about the challenges that I've heard people are experiencing and how we continue to support them in their life after service. Veterans Affairs Minister Jill McKnight. Minister, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's just take a few seconds to listen in.
Good? Turn up the heat.
Absolute symmetry here in the nation's capital as we approach the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. One of the special guests at this year's National Remembrance Day ceremony is Silver Cross Mother Nancy Payne. The Silver Cross is a memento of the personal loss and sacrifices of mothers and widows of those who have died for Canada. Nancy's son Randy and 3 other soldiers were killed in Afghanistan in 2006 when a roadside bomb hit their military vehicle. And as CTV's Abigail Beeman tells us, the grief of losing a child never goes away.
He would walk into a room with this big grin on his face and those eyes, you just knew he was up to something, and he just sort of drew people towards him.
Corporal Randy Payne, a military police officer serving on the close protection team for VIPs in Afghanistan. One of 4 soldiers killed when a roadside bomb hit this G-Wagon.
He was so excited going to Afghanistan. I'm thinking, oh my, Afghanistan. But he was so excited, I had to be happy for him. And I was, I told him that, but deep down I wasn't.
A son in a military family, Nancy Payne is this year's Silver Cross Mother.
It means a lot to represent all the mothers who have lost sons and daughters.
Randy was killed April 2006. 1,000 people showed up for his funeral. For Nancy, it feels like both yesterday and decades ago.
One of his bosses said that they should never have sent him over because he had such a future. He was very good at everything he did there in the policing. He was firm, fair, and friendly.
Payne calls the Silver Cross a huge honor and helps in her quest to make sure Randy is never forgotten. But there's much being done to remember. An award every year at his old high school. And this bridge, the first in Canada to be named for a military police officer. His mother drives by several times a week.
I just talked to him. I says, oh, we miss you, Randy. And I have my own little, rest in peace. And we'll be together again someday.
When Randy was killed, his children were 5 and 7. Tristan spoke at his funeral.
When you see only one set of footprints, it was then that I carried you.
Now daughter Jasmine has a son of her own, Tommy. Randy would have been a grandfather.
He'll have this look on his face like it's just, to me, it's just part of Randy coming out.
Comforted by the feeling and by the knowledge that this Remembrance Day Canadians will remember Randy, with a new generation learning about his story and his service for the first time. Abigail Beeman, CTV News, Lansdowne, Ontario.
And let's bring our panel back in and start with Charlotte Gray. It gives you goosebumps when you hear these stories. I mean, even just to see the image of Randy's grandson now. And what will he learn about his grandfather growing up?
Well, the generational links are amazing, as actually we heard, within the armed forces, and the strength of commitment of those families. But the grief of a Silver Cross mother is palpable, and it's just extraordinary. In fact, after the First World War, there's a marvelous photograph of a car with a woman with actually about 6 women in it, all of whom had lost more than 3 sons. And you just felt, they had given so much for their country. It's humbling.
It certainly is, and you got a sense of just how palpable that grief was. I mean, this is a grief that she's carried since 2006, and it shows you, I mean, anybody who has experienced loss knows that it doesn't disappear. The burden of the weight may get easier to bear with time, but it doesn't disappear completely.
No, but I'm sure that being a Silver Cross mother, nothing can ever reduce the grief of losing a son. But at least, it reinforces her sense, I hope, that her son was doing the right thing.
And as we know, Nancy Payne will be laying a wreath behind us momentarily, and she will be joined by the Chief of the Supreme Court of Canada, Richard Wagner, who is filling in this year for Her Excellency Governor General Mary Simon, the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, who is recovering in hospital because of a respiratory infection. She's said to be doing well. We obviously wish her a good and speedy recovery, but she will not be attending this year. Let's just take a couple of moments to listen in. Major Jean-Michel Guillemot, they talk about military precision. They said the Veterans Parade would start at 10:30, and here we are, right on time in what is always such a powerful moment here at the National Remembrance Day ceremony in Ottawa. I know you recently returned from a deployment in support of what's happening in Ukraine, the conflict in Ukraine. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, Operation Unifier is Canada's mission in support of Ukraine. It's a multinational NATO mission, and I had recently returned in 2024 from that mission, and it was tremendously rewarding.
What are you thinking as you're looking at these images today?
You know, there are people currently serving overseas in Europe and in Africa and in the Middle East, and so I see them out here today, and it's marked around the entire world that Canadians in service, even today, are doing their part. And so this is absolutely brilliant to see everyone out here, and the precision is there. They look fantastic.
I'll admit I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing you because of the bagpipes, so let's just take a little bit of a peek.
Remembrance Day Parade! Attention! Stand up! East!
Dr. Jung, you know, we talk often on a day like today about the cost of conflict, and we know that the battles don't stop once you leave theater, that they continue even when you come back home. As someone who spent so much of his career trying to help people transition back into civilian life, what are you noticing now? I mean, you heard the interview there with the Veterans Affairs Minister in terms of service standards, in terms of access to care, in terms of treatment, in terms of how that transition is happening. What have you observed?
Well, so, you know, the PTSD in particular is not something that happens just immediately after conflict, as in Afghanistan. I'm still seeing patients from 20, 30 years ago who are now developing symptoms of PTSD. So it is a drawn-out process. And given the recent budget requirement for significant downsizing of the public service, you know, I cannot help but feel a bit worried about many of the temporary workers that were hired to expedite the disability claims. And while the minister has said that would not be affected, you know, obviously we can't comment unless we have the full details, but I'd still be a bit concerned that that might be impacted somewhat because of the budget.
And so based on what you've seen, there's still a lot of questions about the reduction in spending of more than $4 billion over the next 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, again, I haven't seen the details of how that's going to be done, but there is a stated goal of reducing the public service numbers significantly over the next few years. And, you know, clearly that's going to have to be impacted, but it's going to impact VAC in some fashion. So the temporary workers are the workers that are probably most likely to be affected. And they're the ones who are right now helping to diminish the backlog and meet the timeline. So if that is impacted, then it's going to have an effect on the veterans on getting their disability awards and services that come with that.
How severe are the backlogs?
Well, it's been getting significantly better because of the hiring, you know, and I think their goal is something like 80% in 16 weeks or so from the application. It is higher than that, but they've been getting close to that mark. But again, with the budget, that might be impacted somewhat.
All right, let's get back to Annie Bergeron-Oliver, who I believe is with an Afghan veteran who's standing by beside you. Annie.
Hi, Omar. I'm with Michael Como, who came all the way from Nova Scotia with his wife. You recently retired from the military last year after serving in Afghanistan and Bosnia. How was that transition from military to civilian life, and what does it mean to be here among so many others who have served?
My transition's been pretty good. I have good days, bad days, and to be here today is something that I've always wanted to do. I've always wanted to lay my poppy on the tomb of the unknown soldier, and it means a lot to be here.
And who are you thinking about today, or what are you thinking about as you're here for the very first time, seeing, you know, the Veterans Parade, seeing all the Second World War veterans, and just taking part in all of it?
I think of my grandfather who served in the Second World War. I think of my uncle who served in the Navy, and he was in Korea. And my brothers and sisters that I lost, friends that I lost in Afghanistan and through the years. And just, you know, just remember all the persons that, you know, made the ultimate sacrifice for Canada.
And is that who you'll be placing a poppy on the tomb of today, is for all of those who you served and fought with who didn't make it home?
Yes, and my grandfather and my uncle.
Thank you very much for telling your story and for being here today. And Omar, this, again, is really what it's about. It's talking to people, sharing their stories about what they have served as well as those they love. And it's all about remembrance today.
Annie, thank you. And just as he was speaking, you could tell how meaningful this day was for him and so many like him here in Ottawa. Well, every veteran has unique stories of service and sacrifice. Elmer Friesen is no different. The 103-year-old veteran has made his way from Calgary to Ottawa for today's ceremony. He didn't spend time on the battlefield, but he found a way to play a crucial role in Canada's war effort. CTV's Kathy Lee has a story.
I would be 20, 21.
Clad in his Royal Canadian Air Force uniform is a young man ready to answer the call of the Second World War.
I thought, oh boy, I'm going overseas. I really wanted to go.
But instead, the new recruit was assigned as a leading aircraft man, stationed in Schaduke, New Brunswick, doing small repairs and sometimes big projects.
We got a Hawker Hurricane, a single-seater fighter plane, And we got it as in kits, and we put it all together. And I did the electrical work on it.
The sparks and circuits kept Elmer Friesen busy for a year and a half until his service took a musical turn.
I was always singing. Wherever I went, I was always singing.
When he was recruited into an entertainment group.
We did variety shows, two of them, and we also did Gilbert and Sullivan Opera. We performed in Moncton and Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island.
Friesen wasn't overseas, but his role at home was just as crucial, lifting spirits of civilians as wartime tension grew.
It was really good to see the reception that we got when we did entertain them. I know that it took some relief out of their concerns.
He would go on to perform for another year or so. And while the curtain has long since fallen, the melodies never really left.
Take me out to the ball game.
At 103, his voice may be softer, but the echo of his service remains. Proof that duty isn't always measured in combat, but sometimes it's measured in music. Kathy Lee, CTV News, Calgary.
He's still got a beautiful voice. And just moments ago, Annie Bergeron-Oliver spoke with Elmer Friesen. Annie.
Omar, I am lucky enough to be joined by 103-year-old Elmer Friesen, almost 104 in March. Yeah. Now, this is the first time you've ever been here in Ottawa. How come you haven't come before, and why did you want to be here?
Well, I've often wanted to come, but I just never got around to it for some reason. I watched it seriously on TV all the time. But this time I just mentioned the fact that I've never been and I would like to go. And my son just said, well, let's go. And he's escorted me all the way through this thing and so far. And it's been well, I'm excited.
There are fewer and fewer Second World War veterans like yourself every year. And it is so important to tell your stories. What do you want people to know and remember about the Second World War?
Well, I don't have any serious, because I didn't go overseas. I served in Canada. And I served as an electrician keeping aircraft in the air. And the second half of my service, I was in entertainment. I was singing and dancing, acting, and just putting on shows with the troupe in the Maritimes, and we just to entertain the local population, to keep their morale up, you know. And we had a lot of fun with it. We went all through New Brunswick mostly, and we did one show in Prince Edward Island. We went across on a fishing boat.
Very important contribution. And just my last question, why is it important to remember every year?
Well, it's just so important to I don't know, it's hard to put words into it, you know. It's just very hard to say just exactly what it was all about. Why? Well, I feel so proud. I really do, you know. I shouldn't maybe, but I do.
You should, absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Friesen, for being here.
Okay.
And I hope that this is everything you've hoped it has been for years.
Well, I'm sure it will be. I'm sure it will be.
Thank you so much.
I would just like to say one other thing. I'm here because of my brother, who is not alive anymore, and 3 of my very closest friends in the Air Force. So that's what I'm here for. They're all gone.
It's lovely of you to come here to remember them, and this is what it's all about, Omar.
Yeah.
Keeping them close to his heart. Can I just say how great he looks for 103, 104 in March? Yeah. Full of passion, full of energy, and obviously still understands, the meaning of giving back and educating. And the reason I love that interview so much is because it goes to show that you don't have to be in theater, you don't have to be in combat in order to serve. And Elmer served in a very unique way. What are your thoughts as you were watching that interview, Jean-Michel?
There's just so many ways to serve. And that was a brilliant example of that. In Europe right now, in Op Unifier, Canadians are doing a training mission. They're delivering training to Ukrainians. And in Afghanistan, it was a combat mission. And so Canadians are able to deliver to the cause, and they're able to deliver in any way that the Canadian people asked us to do, and that's just one example, Omar, and quite brilliant to see him here.
I believe you yourself are celebrating quite a major milestone this winter. I believe it's 20 years.
It's 20 years
of
yes,
service.
Yes.
And what have you noticed in terms of how warfare has changed? What challenges are there now?
We're always having to become ready for the next challenge. You know, overseas we talk about the utility of drones and how drone warfare is going to be a major part of the combat environment in the future, and we have to adapt, and we have to be prepared to adapt, and it's part of that readiness. We have to be ready to deliver the effects that are asked of us. And so over 20 years I've seen so much change, and there's so much change to come.
As you're speaking, Jean-Michel, we're just looking at live pictures now of the various VIPs arriving on site. This, I believe, is the Prime Minister's motorcade. Mark Carney should be stepping out of that vehicle shortly. And then, as we mentioned earlier, Her Excellency Mary Simon, the Governor-General, is not able to attend this year because of a respiratory virus. She's in hospital. Rita Hall says she is doing well. We do wish her a swift recovery. In her place, however, will be the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Here he is, the Prime Minister.
Welcome to the ceremony. Randy's gonna. Thank you for all your service. You're welcome, sir. Thank you very much. Omar and Bosnia and beyond. Yeah. Family history goes back to the First World War. We'll get in place. Keep things on.
The Prime Minister, of course, with his wife and the Royal Canadian Legion President. This, of course, being Mark Carney's first Remembrance Day as Prime Minister. Charlotte Gray, I want to talk to you a little bit about these investments that we saw in last week's budget. Again, about $84 billion over 5 years. These are significant. In terms of the history of Canada, how significant?
They're very significant. It's the largest budget increase that the Department of Defense has had since the years of the Korean War. Since then, there has been sort of a gradual decline. If you look at the figures, the line was always going down. It's meant that there is a tremendous overhang of repairs and lack of personnel that has to be made up, as well as they're obviously going to have a huge recruitment drive now. There's a big boost, which had already been announced, to salaries for the armed forces. There's a real question of whether the department will be able to actually handle this fire hose of money that's coming at them. But I think we should remember that actually a lot of the spending, well, first of all, the Prime Minister's made it very clear that it's going to be within Canada, and it's also part of his sort of larger industrial policy for repatriating some of the manufacture of armaments and preparation of materials into this country and giving Canadian industry a boost. So it's part of industrial policy as well as military policy. I mean, I am very happy, as I'm sure many, many, many Canadians are, to see that there's going to be much more spending up north to guard our northern border. That's been overdue for some time, and I really hope that, in fact, there's going to be it's going to help the local populations up there who desperately need employment, housing, and some of the ancillary benefits that spending could bring. It's going to take years, actually, to spend all this money, and how quickly it'll be spent is a big issue, and because there are so many layers of oversight. But it's a complete change of direction from previous budgets.
Charlotte, I'm just going to briefly interrupt you. Here is Nancy Payne, the National Silver Cross mother, whose harrowing story and whose son's harrowing story we just heard not too long ago from Abigail Beeman. Her son Randy, of course, died in Afghanistan in 2006, and we saw that beautiful image of his grandson in Abigail's story. She, of course, will be laying a wreath on behalf of all mothers and widows of those who've died in service.
She reminds us that, in fact, behind every individual in uniform, there's several people who got them there, and several people who are supporting them and making sure that Canada has a fit armed force.
Jean-Michel, you know, you were telling us how you come from a long line of family members who've served, in service of Canada. Did anybody at any point, just because of the risk, express any doubts given the dangers? Did you feel any doubts about joining?
It's not doubt. It's not doubt. There's no doubt in my mind that it was very difficult for my mom to see my brother and I go out the door and go overseas, and very difficult to see my father go out the door and serve. But it wasn't fear. You know, it was driven by pride. But it's always in the back of your mind that, you know, this is a very dangerous world, and this is a very dangerous business sometimes, and there are risks. And so, you know, Canada holds up all mothers and all family members that watch at the doorstep, hoping that, you know, everyone goes out and comes back safe.
And Remembrance Day, of course, you know, significant every year. Do you feel as though this year it's especially significant just because of the simultaneous conflicts we've been seeing around the world and the human cost of those conflicts?
I thought about that. You know, we're on the doorstep of 2026. We're the 80th anniversary. Perhaps we are time past point, and Remembrance Day doesn't have the significance. But then I look out and, no, it has just as much significance today as it always had.
And here is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Richard Wagner, joined by Whit Fraser, who is the partner of the Governor General Mary Simon, who again is in hospital recovering from a respiratory virus.
Remembrance Day Parade to the Chief Justice of Canada! To your front! Salute! Youth, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
Ladies and gentlemen, O Canada, with members of the Central Band of the Canadian Armed Forces and the Ottawa Children's Choir. Mesdames et Messieurs, O Canada, avec les membres de la musique centrale des Forces armées canadiennes et du Chœur des enfants d'Ottawa.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
Ils ne vieilliront pas comme nous, qui leur avons survécu. Ils ne connaîtront jamais l'outrage ni le poids des années. Quand viendra l'heure du crépuscule et celle de l'aurore, nous nous souviendrons d'eux.
إنه بدأ من متى وبقول لك مكتوي يقول إنه بدأ نقول أقاعد أكتب جاي من متى أقاعد يوم لو صوت تول جانا عتي سقينا نبيلك بد تليلك بد ولا كود سقينا نويلك بد القوم نقول القوم نعتبر بيجو جاني تقول.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Mesdames et messieurs, veuillez vous asseoir.
Nous sommes profondément reconnaissants d'être réunis en ce lieu solennel
in
de
this
souvenir.
place of remembrance.
And so we pause today with those around Canada and the world, each of us coming from different perspectives, faiths, and traditions, to recall together the sacrifices of those who have served before us, and to be inspired by their example of dedication, of courage, and of pride. Nous rendons hommage à ceux et celles qui
We
ont
give
répondu
homage
à
to
l'appel
those
de la
who've answered the call of battle
qui ont été marqués
and
par ce
who
qu'ils ont
were
vu,
marked by what they have seen, heard, and done in the name of freedom and hope.
que cette période où tous les Canadiens
Let this period where all Canadians are united in solidarity bring some peace and comfort to these people and their families.
today reminds us that life and peace are fragile. While we take time to recall our past, let us also recognize the progress and potential that those past sacrifices won for us. And let us look ahead with hope to the promise of a more just society. Nous rendons hommage aux familles
We give homage to the families of the Canadian Armed Forces. They've given of themselves, they have loved and lost, and without their support, the service of our uniformed personnel would be impossible.
And we offer our gratitude to the Silver Cross Mother and all the families who themselves bear the scars of military service. Their loss is our loss, and we join them in remembrance today and all days. Nous soutenons tous les dirigeants de notre
We support all leaders of our country and their commitment to make our world a better place by asking them to continue serving with integrity, courage, and wisdom.
On this 25th anniversary of the tomb of the unknown soldier, we ponder here the mystery of life and death and pause to thank those who never came home. Puis ce lieu le solennel et tout ce qu'il représente.
On this place and everything it represents should encourage us to strive for peace in a suffering world.
Lest we forget. N'oublions jamais.
Lest we forget.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Viceregal Party will now begin placing their wreaths. Mesdames et messieurs, le cortège vice-royal déposera maintenant...
Ladies and gentlemen, the Viceroyal people will be putting their wreaths.
A sizable crowd, of course, gathered for this powerful National Remembrance Day ceremony in the nation's capital on an overcast day here in Ottawa. Charlotte Gray, the 25th anniversary of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. There, of course, was a time in this country's history where there was one Tomb of the Unknown Soldier at Westminster Abbey to mark the graves of the unknown, whose remains we had not been able to identify. And then it was in the year 2000 that Canada got its own.
Yes, the one in Britain is always known as the Tomb of the Unknown Warrior. And gradually the former colonies and then members of the Commonwealth, several, including Australia and New Zealand, decided to have their own Tomb of the Unknown Warrior. Canada was a laggard in this respect, but the Canadian Legion lobbied, amongst others, and in 2000, finally, the body of an unnamed soldier who'd fought probably at Vimy Ridge in the First World War was brought for a very moving ceremony. It was then Governor-General Adrian Clarkson gave the most magnificent speech about the importance of the armed forces in our history.
Dr. Jung, you know, as much as today is about reflecting on the past, it's also looking ahead to the future and the future of Canada's military. There was a historic apology that the Chief of the Defence Staff, Jenny Carignan, delivered last month, of course, for what she described as systemic racism in the military. As Canada's first Surgeon General of a visible minority, who's a visible minority, tell us a little bit about your experience and what that apology meant for you.
Well, personally for me, I was fortunate in not feeling a sense of systemic racism towards me. I mean, obviously my career reflected that because I was able to progress to the senior ranks of the medical service. That being said, there were incidents of racism in sort of individually, but they were really relatively minor, and I always took in the perspective that there are always, shall we say, idiots in the world, and you can't take that and translate that to the whole country. Canada is a very generous country, and if you compare Canada to most countries in the world, we are probably the most generous society in that regard. We're not perfect by any means, and we can always improve ourselves on that. But the recognition, it was just that recognition that things did happen, and that we can look forward to, hopefully, for a better future with better integration, better harmony for all citizens concerned.
Jean-Michel, what sort of shift have you seen? You know, a priority for this CDS has been to address head-on what women have gone through in this military, the sexual assault in the military, the problems there. Is that situation getting better? Is that being addressed to the level it should be?
We earn the trust of the Canadian people, and we earn it every day, and we have to continue to maintain that trust. And you see it in our recruiting detachments. Back at home at my recruiting detachment, people are trusting the Canadian Armed Forces, and they're trusting us with their sons and daughters, and so people are joining in droves. And you heard the CDS this morning. We are challenged to grow and to go into our communities and showcase the military, and I believe that trust is there, and we're seeing it in our new recruits, and we're having a banner year. I think it's really going to see the numbers to come.
And it's interesting you should mention that. I do want to ask you about that, but I just want to reference the shot that we saw. Remembrance Day's ceremonies unfolding live. You saw it happening in 6 cities in Canada, and of course this one being the biggest one here in Ottawa. You mentioned, Jean-Michel, a banner year. This despite what the Auditor General said in terms of the challenges of recruitment. We're asking you about this because you have a lot of experience with recruitment, and you keep inclusion and diversity at the forefront of what you do. What have you noticed on the front lines?
Well, it's in the recruiting detachments. What we're seeing is we're seeing lots of Canadians interested in what we have to offer. We run a high school cooperative education program where young Canadians can earn accreditations for high school through our programming. We offer just so much. And so I'm hoping that you'll see that in Ottawa and in our numbers, and if we do well at the coalface, at my recruiting detachment, I'm hoping that manifests up here in Ottawa, and you'll see those numbers, and we'll meet the challenge that the CDS has put to us.
Today, we gather at this sacred space to honor those who served and those who never came home. Ils se sont battus non
They
seulement
fought not only to defend our country, but to define it.
As Prime Minister John Diefenbaker once said, "I am Canadian, free to speak without fear, free to worship God in my own way, free to stand for what I think right. Freedom, the right to be oneself." It's a simple idea, but it's what our soldiers gave everything to protect. They fought so we could live free. In the final weeks of the Second World War, Sergeant Léo Major of Quebec carried out a night mission in the occupied Dutch city of Zwolle. When his comrade was killed, he pressed on alone and completed the mission, helping to spare the city from devastation. Afterward, he said simply, "I wasn't fighting for medals. I was fighting so people I did not know could live free." And that is the legacy of the Canadian Armed Forces. From Vimy Ridge to Kandahar, from Juno Beach to Latvia today, nos soldats se sont tenus debout.
Our soldiers have stood up to affirm the sacred value of each human, for the conviction that freedom is not a privilege, but a right for all.
So we could live free. During the war in Afghanistan, Captain Nicola Goddard became the first Canadian woman to die in combat. She would express in her letters home, "I'm not here because I like war. I'm here because I believe in peace, and peace needs protectors." She was right. Peace needs protectors. And so does freedom, and so does human dignity. Our soldiers have always been those protectors. They have always known that freedom is not only won in battle, it must be lived back at home, in how we treat one another, and how we honor those who served. Today and every day, we honor the legacy of our troops, not only with immense, undying gratitude, but by becoming protectors ourselves, safeguarding the freedom, the dignity, and the belonging that are the right of every single Canadian. Today we remember, today we recommit to a Canada as shaped by our heroic Canadian and their courageous families. for they fought so we could live free. May the memory of the fallen be our guiding light. May those who serve today, they and their loved ones, be blessed with safety and strength. And may God grant us the courage to live as they fought, for freedom, for peace, and for the infinite worth of every human soul. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, God save the King with the Ottawa Children's Choir. Mesdames et messieurs, que Dieu protège le roi avec le chœur des enfants d'Ottawa. Thank you for your attendance at today's National Remembrance Day ceremony. Today, as a grateful nation, we stand in collective remembrance of all who have fallen in the military service of Canada. May we never forget. Please stay in position for the march-off and departure of the Vice-Regal Party. We will announce when you may enter the site. Merci d'être parmi nous à l'occasion de la cérémonie nationale.
Thank you for being with us for the Remembrance Day ceremony. Today is the opportunity for our nation to recognize and to express the remembrance of those who died in the service of our country. Never forget. Please stay in place while the exit of the Viceroyal Party, we will announce when you'll be able to access the site.
We'll march past in column of route. Veterans leading. Move to the right in column of route. Right. Guard.
Finally, achieving over the past 2 weeks during this year's National Hockey Campaign, the Royal Canadian Legion's Reading Command has been honored to present its virtual hockey drop. It can be seen as
various VIPs now, including the Silver Cross Mother, leaving, shaking hands, and an incredible, harrowing story she has of the personal loss of her son, Randy, who died in Afghanistan in 2006. Charlotte, you and I were talking about the fact that the children's choir is such a meaningful part of the ceremony every year. I mean, these are the future. These are the very people that the men and women fought for.
It's always inspiring, actually. The music for this ceremony is very carefully chosen and beautifully choreographed, but for me, a high spot every year is the Ottawa Children's Choir, who spend all year, as far as I know, rehearsing for this. They do a marvelous job. And when you talk about, you know, this is the next generation, these are the people for whom so many of our veterans fought and died. This is true, and it's interesting that although you look at the crowds today, and it's a really hardy crowd because the weather here in Ottawa is so cold today, but when you look at the crowds, yes, there are a lot of very elderly people there who lost friends and siblings in the different armaments, but in the different wars. But nonetheless, there are lots of youngsters there too, with remembering parents and grandparents and understanding the significance of today. There is a sense of a tradition and a sense that those are perhaps members of the armed forces of the future.
We should also point out that that was Elmer Friesen, whose profile we saw earlier in this special, the 103-year-old veteran who will be turning 104 in March. A remarkable story he has. Jean-Michel, let me talk to you a little bit about some of your thoughts this morning. I mean, hearing the anthem play. We talked about the significance of this day each and every year, but this year it seems especially significant, especially in light of what we're seeing happening with the U.S. and our identity coming to the fore of who we are as a country.
And truthfully, this is common Canadian culture. You know, that we wonder, oh, do we have our own culture? We do, and it's here. We've gathered all around the country, but what you're seeing here is common Canadian culture, for which we should be absolutely proud. New Canadians should see this as our culture. Canadians from all across the country should really look to this and see themselves in everyone marching past and everyone in the crowd. That's absolutely brilliant.
It's a ceremony that is unique to Canada and part of this country's uniqueness and part of sort of what we are usually so bad at expressing, but which we're particularly conscious of this year.
And again, this is not unique to this year, to see this spontaneous applause from the crowd as we see people marching by is something we see each and every year, and it's a tangible symbol of the gratitude that so many Canadians feel on this day.
If I could make a quick shout out, the RCMP are always well represented here, you know, and they've been present in both world wars, and they've also participated in most of the operations that Canadian forces have deployed. So I just like to give a quick shout out for them too, because many of them are in my veterans medical practice also as veterans.
That's a very good point, and we saw not too long ago the RCMP Black Hawk helicopter as part of the fly past. We do know that the CF-18s, that fly past was canceled this year because of precisely what you're seeing right now, these overcast skies because of the weather. So that did not happen, but we did get the Black Hawk helicopter. Annie Bergeron-Oliver is standing by. Annie, powerful every year and powerful again this year.
That's right, Omar, and that's why people come back every year, is to just be part of this, to feel it. And you know what's interesting? People really care about where they stand in some cases. I talked to somebody earlier who said they've sat in the exact same spot every year for 10 years because they want to be able to see the veterans, the 103-year-old. They want to be able to see the dignitary. I'm here with Joni from Surrey. She's got a pretty good vantage point as the Veterans Parade is happening. You are here because of your father, who was a pilot in the Second World War. Tell me a bit about these mementos that you have with you.
He was a flight officer during World War II in the Royal Canadian Air Force. He was a tail gunner. This is him during the war. This is him as an old man.
And what has it been like for you, Joni, to be here to see all of this? This is not something that
it made me very, very proud. Very proud. And considering what's going on in the world right now, I think Canada is an awesome place to be. And I think we are well represented on the world stage. And I'm just proud to be a Canadian. I'm proud to be here to share this today.
What has been your favorite part so far? What has kind of touched you the most about this service?
Just being here after always watching it on TV, just being here in person.
Is it what you expected? Stronger, more emotional? How do you feel?
Emotional, I think. Yeah. No, it's just awesome to be here.
Thank you so much, Joni. I appreciate it. And Omar, you see this, all around the crowd, people like Joni who have these mementos of people that they want to remember today, and a little piece of history that I'm sure is extra meaningful today.
Absolutely, Annie. And Joni mentioned something interesting. She said, given everything that's happening in the world, Jean-Michel, just your thoughts on that. I mean, in terms of recruitment, in terms of getting more people to join the CAF, do you think that the global conflicts that we're seeing right now, to the degree that we're seeing them, will that dissuade people from joining, or do you think it'll encourage them?
No, they'll be encouraged. They look to Canada, and they truthfully, it's not about the dangers abroad. It's about service and going out and doing your part. And so I don't think they'll be dissuaded at all. And that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing many Canadians wanting to participate, wanting to contribute, and wanting to join. And so I don't think they're dissuaded at all.
And how do you keep these stories alive? I mean, more than 1 million Canadians served in the Second World War. We know that fewer than 4,000 are still with us today. How do you keep the history of their service and sacrifice alive, Dr. John?
Well, I mean, I think, Canadians getting together on a day like today to remember, but we shouldn't be doing this just one day out of the year. Canada is fortunate to live in a geographical area where we're relatively safe, but the world is not safe. And the so-called peace dividend has never really come to fruition. And we're seeing that in spades in Europe right now. And the idea that, peace is unfortunately guaranteed with sufficient deterrent force. And that is something that is proven to be true throughout the history. And I think we need to remember the sacrifice that is not made just on November 11th, but throughout the year.
When you look at the history of nationhood, Charlotte, every country goes through these periods in time in their histories, whether it's through great battles or other experiences that really define who they are as a people. And it would seem to me that we're going through that right now in the history of Canada's existence.
I think we are, but I wanted to just mention that one of the people who has been most important in keeping those stories alive, in reintroducing each subsequent generation to Canada's achievements, particularly during 2 world wars, was the historian Tim Cook, who we sadly lost a month or 2 ago. I was at his funeral on Sunday. It was so sad. There were many, many members and former members of the armed forces there, because Tim's books on Canada and the 2 world wars and the importance of what those soldiers felt, because Tim wrote about military history not from the top down, from what the generals were doing, although he was very good on that subject, but he wrote it from the bottom up, the records and archives that soldiers left of what life was like in the trenches or on the destroyers in the world wars. And he was a magnificent writer, and he kept that history alive, and we've lost him. I'm just hoping that there's a Tim Cook of the next generation who will continue that tradition, continue that extraordinary literary contribution to underlining the importance of Canada's participation in the world and in the engagements that are continuing today, in terms of exactly what we've all been saying of, and what many of the speakers were saying about sort of democratic values, freedom of speech, and everything we just take for granted, because we do live on a continent which, until very recently, we just felt our neighbor would protect us.
I'm so glad you mentioned Tim Cook, because so many people have been reflecting on his life and his legacy, and his whole life's work was about keeping the history of Canada and the contributions that Canadians have made alive. We've got a clip from him back from 2007 talking about the importance of Vimy Ridge for Canada. Here it is.
They went ordinary Canadians, often doing the extraordinary. And I think that if we can understand those Canadians and what they did, maybe we get a better sense of our own collective past.
And again, that was Tim Cook, the the noted historian Tim Cook back in 2007, talking about the importance of Vimy Ridge, why it's so important to our history. And he was, of course, the longtime curator at the Canadian War Museum. As we know, he published 19 books, a prolific writer, and even more articles dedicating his career to preserving and documenting the human cost of war. Tim, of course, helped the young and the old understand what happened on the battlefield and why those stories are still important. Tim Cook was 54. He is survived by his wife Sarah and daughters Chloe, Emma, and Paige. And this, Charlotte, was his service to Canada.
It was a very important service, and one much appreciated, in fact, by the armed forces, who understood that by telling the stories, by underlining the importance of what had been achieved during, in particular, 2 world wars, he helped Canadians come together to celebrate a country that's frankly not that good at celebrating its uniqueness and developing a sense of patriotism.
Jean-Michel, any thoughts on Tim Cook?
You know, we're the stewards of our history, and it's so important that the next generation carries those stories and understands our history. So, one, we don't repeat mistakes, and two, that we are proud of what we're going to embark on in the future. And so, as stewards, it's very important. And of course, you know, Mr. Cook was just that for us. You know, an ability to hear from history where we were and where we're going to go in the future.
And Hans, we heard in that clip, in that very short clip, I think it was something like 30 seconds, how passionate he was, how relatable he was, and how articulate he was about Canadian contributions.
Yeah, and as a doctor, I you know, it's tragic that somebody would pass on such a young age. And you know, he had this knack of telling a story that is very, very complex, but in a way that the average Canadian can understand. And that sort of history is very difficult sometimes, but you know, to be able to have such a great storyteller who can actually translate that into a common language so that people can understand and empathize, it was a tremendous talent.
What are some of the challenges now in keeping some of that history alive? You know, we talked a little bit about this before. There are fewer and fewer veterans. How does that connection happen with younger people and younger generations?
Yeah, I mean, I think the longer the time span goes from a generation's experience to future generation, the more difficult that gets. But when you look at the world situation today with Latvia and so forth, more and more Canadian soldiers are now being deployed again. And they're going to bring back that experience. And they will be able to then translate that to their family, to their friends, and it'll be a multiplication factor. And I think that will carry on.
Jean-Michel, what are we seeing today in terms of the gratitude and, you know, despite the criticisms that we've seen from other countries that perhaps Canada wasn't pulling its weight before the most recent commitments we saw in the budget last week, there's still, you know, an immense level of gratitude, you know, in terms of Canadian expertise. You've probably seen some of that firsthand. Yes. Talk to me a little bit about that with Operation Unifier, especially.
One of my proudest moments was looking at the Canadian contingent teaching the Ukrainians, and a senior Ukrainian Armed Forces general came over and he said, you know, JM, this is saving Ukrainian lives in the pursuit of peace back at home. And that was, you know, that sense of that gratitude that he had shared with me about what we are doing was a very, very important part of the deployment. It was so rewarding to hear that and to know that that gratitude not only extends here in Canada but around the world, and that was very, very touching.
Yeah, and you know, we are learning a lot from Ukrainians themselves. In Afghanistan, you know, we had this so-called platinum 10 minutes and golden hour. Well, that concept is completely gone. Without air superiority, we're back to the square one again, and we are learning tremendous amount of how to provide medical care in a combat environment where we have no security or in providing that care. And that has completely turned the medical service doctrine upside down. And so all of the Western countries are now going back to the doctrine and trying to figure out how to provide that critical medical care in an austere environment where you have no security because of the drones, because of lack of air superiority. So this is a major challenge to all the medical services in the Western world as we look to the future.
And I suppose that speaks in many ways to Canadian ingenuity and the ability to adapt in very difficult circumstances. Yeah. I believe we've got some photos of you, Dr. Jung, too, that we can pull up from your experience. I believe we have photos of you in Afghanistan, in Haiti, and also in Whitehorse, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, yeah, this is in Afghanistan. We were providing medical education to the Afghan military people. And this is in Haiti after the earthquake disaster. We provided a field hospital there with imaging and full surgical capability. And this is a Afghan military hospital that we're providing mentorship to. I think this is back in Haiti. This is in Whitehorse. It's a search and rescue exercise we're doing in Whitehorse, Yukon.
And we're going to bring up the live shots of the National Remembrance Day ceremony, which has just concluded here in the nation's capital. Jean-Michel, I want to talk to you a little bit about those domestic deployments, if you will, because there's a lot of being placed on our CAF members, especially with things like climate change, right? We saw as recently as this summer, the province of Manitoba declared a state of emergency. The military was right there on the ground helping. And so as much as the focus has been beyond our borders, especially in this day and age, a lot of that service and those contributions are happening within our own borders.
And it's becoming more and more real. We heard from the Chief of Defence Staff that the Canadian Army is modernizing, the Canadian Armed Forces is modernizing. I will soon belong to the Defence of Canada Division, and we will be responsible for the Defence of Canada here at home, and that includes the effects of climate change and forest fires and floods, even pandemics. And just like we saw with Operation Laser, our Canadian Armed Forces support to the pandemic. And so the Defence of Canada will be a part of, the modernization that we will see, and it'll be called the Defence of Canada Division, headquartered in Montreal. We look very forward to that, that change.
It is a challenging time, though, isn't it? We're seeing these natural climate disasters, and also, as you referenced earlier, the technology has changed so much. Drone warfare, cyber warfare. How good of a job are we doing in terms of staying on top of it all?
It's about readiness. And it's about training. And so my unit alone, we train all year long for the eventualities to come, whether that be the Defence of Canada or others. And truly, Canada is ready. We're ready to take on these challenges, no matter how great and how monumental these challenges may be in the future. Canada stands ready, and I'm actually quite proud of that, in fact.
I want to get back to Annie Bergeron-Oliver, who is, with the star of the show, if I could put it that way, Elmer Friesen, 103 years old, a veteran who is turning 104 in March. Annie.
Mr. Friesen just said he's never seen so many people before. No. Tell me a bit about what was this like your first time here?
Well, it was just overwhelming. I can't believe. It's just something really special. I'm so glad that my son thought I should come here to experience this alive, and it's been so moving. I really felt the what shall I say, the sacrifice of so many guys and never came home. And here I am sitting here, and people are admiring me for, and it was a privilege for me to be in the service, really. It was just, something I can't really describe it, One thing I definitely wanted to be, I wanted to be a volunteer, and I did. I didn't get conscripted. I volunteered for what I did, and although I didn't go overseas and get into any conquest or anything like that, but I always like to say this: I did what I was asked to do, and I served where I was asked to serve. So it's it's great memory now that I had a good part in it. The fact is that Canada was the place where all the British, all the Australian and Canadian pilots were trained in Canada. And so I was a part of that because I was repairing parts that kept airplanes in the air. Yeah.
Well, it was an honor to meet you, Mr. Friesen, and I'm so glad that you were able to make it here with your son. And are you going to be placing this poppy down on the tomb with so many? And what are you going to be thinking about? Who will you be thinking about when you put that poppy down on the tomb?
We're all thinking about mostly my brother. Yes. Yeah, I will. So.
Thank you so much for being here, and please get warm. It's been a long day for you.
I'm going to be very glad when I can get warm. It's pretty cold. Yeah.
Back to you, Omar.
Yeah. Well,
Annie, thank you. I think I speak for everybody when I say we love that guy. We love Elmer Friesen. We want to break some bread with him. What an incredible inspiration he is. And it is a chilly day, although I do see a little glimmer of sunshine as the skies begin to open up, almost on cue on this National Day of Remembrance. I want to get back to our panel for some final thoughts. Charlotte, as we look ahead to the future, what are you most thinking of?
Well, I'm wondering what the future brings, of course, because it's quite an uncertain world out there. I'm very touched every year as this year even more than ever because of the chilly weather and all the reasons for not being here. How many people come? How many people now have taken it as part of the day to go and lay their poppies on the tomb of the unknown soldier? And I'm just struck by the strength of feeling of so many of the people Annie interviewed, of the speakers themselves. It's a really wonderful day.
It is. And this, a dramatic scene every year as people go and drop off their poppies at the tomb of the unknown soldier. Dr. Jung.
Well, I'm reminded that we live in a very unstable world, but I have to, I think everybody should think positive, and that Canada is a wonderful place to live, and that we need to stay unified and think about our national identity, and to constantly remind ourselves that freedom is never free.
And this was such a powerful reminder of that today, Jean-Michel.
And the solemn part is over. Now we are uplifted. You heard the band, the fanfare. We are now going to join in each other's company, and we're going to break bread, and we're going to celebrate in each other's company. And so everyone out here, they're going to lay their poppies, and now they're going to join each other and join in each other's company, quite like we had the opportunity this morning to do. So I look forward to the future. I mean, this is so uplifting now. I feel uplifted, having gone through what we do every year, and that's that solemn part. But I feel uplifted, and thank you, Omar.
Thank you. Let's just take a look at Elmer Friesen laying his poppy at the tomb of the unknown soldier. Such a powerful moment.
He really is the epitome of the lone old warrior, isn't he?
He's the golden generation.
Just determined to be there.
Big shoes to fill.
Thank you very much.
Outside, braving the cold, braving the elements, but never once forgetting why he's here. Along with thousands of others. I would like to thank our guest, Dr. Hans Jung, author and historian Charlotte Gray, and Deputy Commander Major Jean-Michel Guidleau for being part of this very important day and guiding us through the events of this morning here at the National War Memorial in Ottawa. We'll have more on today's events across the country on CTV National News with Sandy Ronaldo this afternoon. And I'll be back with you for CTV National News tonight at 11. Thank you as well for joining us. CTV News Channel will have continuing coverage throughout the day. We leave you now with some of the sights and sound of this powerful day.